A young boy named Danny was playing hide-and-seek at home when he accidentally stumbled upon a basement. He had no idea such a space existed in the house. As he curiously explored the area, an eerie noise shattered the dead silence. In a panic, Danny rushed into a small dark room and discovered a box in the corner. Curious, he opened the box and found an intricately made space adventure board game. He then noticed a wind-up key on the game board, so he turned the key out of curiosity and pressed the nearby red button. The red ship on the board then moved 5 steps forward and a white card was immediately spat out from the board. But Danny had no idea what was written on it, so he called his brother Walter to help him read it.
Meteor shower, take evasive action.
As soon as he did, the card was pierced by an unknown object. And even the floor was smashed, leaving a hole. However, they didn't expect an even bigger surprise to follow. To avoid the sudden meteor shower, the brothers quickly hid inside the fireplace. It wasn't until a larger meteor hit the TV that the meteor shower stopped. What puzzled them even more was that such an intense meteor shower was confined to the living room. When they looked up through the large hole above, they saw a night sky unlike anything they'd ever seen before. So the two brothers curiously opened the door to investigate, only to find a giant meteor right outside their door, and not far away, a huge orange planet. The breathtaking sight left the brothers completely stunned. Curious, Walter walked straight ahead and spat, only to see the saliva float in the air, slowly drifting toward the planet. Frightened, they quickly retreated and hid back inside the house. At that moment, they felt like a lonely spaceship drifting through the vast rings of Saturn. The two then hurried to the bedroom to wake their sleeping sister, Lisa, wanting to tell her everything they had seen. But when she saw her brothers showing her a board game, she felt insulted and immediately closed the door. At that moment, Danny pressed the start button. The ship moves forward 4 steps and spits out a card that says your crew will spend 5 rounds in hibernation. Before they could react, a chill emanated from the door crack, even forming a thick layer of frost on the door. Walter then realized the gravity of the situation, and it took a lot of effort to push open the iced-over toilet door. Inside, it had turned into a big freezer, and Lisa had become an ice sculpture. Just as Walter pulls out his musket in an attempt to warm Lisa's body, he is stopped by Danny. He suggested that to prevent a tragedy, it would be best to read the game instructions first. Back in the living room, the two brothers quickly learned from the instructions that once the game starts, someone must reach the end, or it will never finish. This meant they had no choice but to grit their teeth and continue playing. Walter then turned the key and pressed the button. The ship popped up a card after moving 8 frames.
Your robot is defective.
The next moment, a mini-robot appeared in front of them. While the two brothers were arguing about the mini-robot, it began to expand at a visible rate. By the time they noticed, the robot was already charging at them at full speed. But luckily, it got stuck in the wall and couldn't move. Walter urged Danny to continue the game, but the robot had already freed itself and was heading straight for Walter. Danny pressed the button, and the game board immediately ejected another card. Before they could read its contents, the entire house began to shake violently, and they found themselves directly above a red giant star. The strong gravitational pull caused the house to tilt, pulling all the items inside toward the red giant. The house was quickly approaching the star, and the robot's movement slowed down significantly. The brothers had to hold onto nearby objects to avoid being sucked away. But as the gravitational pull gets stronger, the giant robot is pulled out the moment it grabs Walter. Danny, unable to hold on, was rapidly being drawn toward the star. Fortunately, the thick window glass saved him from being sucked out. As the card's effect gradually wore off, the house rapidly moved away from the star's gravitational field, and Lisa slid down the stairs. The robot, caught in the gravitational pull, crashed into the basement and was severely damaged by its own weapons. However, when Walter went to check on it, he discovered that the robot had self-repair capabilities. Terrified, Walter locked the door and ran out. It was clear that a wooden door wouldn't stop the robot. To end all this, they had to finish the game as quickly as possible. This time, Walter's luck skyrocketed, promoted directly to 5-star Admiral, moves 4 steps forward, and does not trigger any events. However, Danny now refused to continue the game. The two brothers engaged in another heated argument as they couldn't reach a consensus. It wasn't until Walter promised to treat Danny better that Danny agreed to continue the game. With the press of a button, another card popped out.
We're visited by Zorgons.
Before the brothers could react, a massive alien spaceship had already parked right in front of their house. It was clear that this spaceship wasn't as friendly as they had imagined. Left with no choice, the two rushed to hide inside the fireplace again. However, the aliens were relentless, firing at the house continuously. In the blink of an eye, the house was riddled with holes. Walter hurriedly twisted the clockwork again and pressed the button, and soon got a reset card. Not expecting a shell to greet him immediately, it looked like the card couldn't do anything. Danny then pressed the red button, and this time the card read "Rescue the stranded astronaut." The next second, an astronaut appeared at the window. Terrified, the brothers hid in a corner, but the astronaut entered the house, took off his helmet, and announced that he was there to help them fend off the aliens. Just as he finished speaking, another cannonball came flying in. Under the astronaut's guidance, the brothers quickly turned off all sources of fire and electricity in the house. With the lights out, the spaceship immediately ceased its attack. It seemed the ship was targeting based on light sources. The astronaut then lit the entire sofa on fire and pushed it outside the door. As expected, the spaceship, reactivated, chased after the burning sofa. However, the brothers were shocked to find the astronaut had eaten the last bit of food left in their fridge. Seeing this, Walter remarked that since the aliens were gone, the astronaut could now leave too, but the astronaut replied that since Danny had summoned him, he would only listen to Danny. Walter immediately pulled out a 5-star general card.
Well, I'm Fleet Admiral, and I'm telling you to hit the road.
To his surprise, the astronaut also produced an identical card, making it clear he had no intention of leaving. Left with no other option, the brothers had to continue the unfinished game. Just as Walter was about to resume playing, he noticed that Danny's spaceship had somehow moved ahead. Seeing Danny's unnatural expression, Walter suspected him of cheating. Once again, the brothers started arguing. In a fit of rage, Walter pushed Danny's spaceship back, but strangely, the number dial didn't stop spinning. A yellow card popped out, stating, "Caught cheating, ejection imminent." Luckily, Walter grabbed onto the roof, narrowly avoiding being sucked into space. However, the suction force was too strong, and Walter eventually lost his grip. At the critical moment, the astronaut stepped in and saved Walter. Still, Danny was angry with Walter. It was Danny's turn to play, and the dial stopped at 8. Unfortunately, the spaceship moved back again, but after 5 rounds, Lisa finally returned to normal. However, feeling unusually cold, she turned the bathroom heater to its maximum setting. Little did she know, this action would plunge them into another crisis. At this moment, Walter spun the dial to 9, and a never-before-seen gold card popped out. Meteors come and realities are wished for. Danny suggested they wish to go home, but Walter, still holding a grudge, blamed Danny for cheating, saying that they wouldn't be in this mess if it weren't for him, even blaming Danny for their parents' separation. Hearing this, Danny threw down the game board and ran off. Just then, a brilliant white light shone outside, and an incredibly bright meteor appeared. Sensing something was wrong, the astronaut warned Walter not to make a wish out of anger, but Walter made the wish anyway.
What'd you wish for?
Can't tell you.
Tell me.
No, you know the rules about wishing. If I told you, it won't come.
Tell me what you wished for.
Realizing the gravity of the situation, the astronaut rushed to the upstairs bedroom, only to find no trace of Danny. Instead, Walter follows into the room with a rugby ball and says he got his wish. As the astronaut began to scold Walter, Danny emerged from under the bed. That's when Walter said he'd asked for an autographed football. Danny was incredibly depressed to hear that Danny had made such a boring wish.
You could have wished us out of here. I was under a lot of pressure. He was yelling at me.
Seeing the two brothers accusing themselves together, he could only tell the truth as it was. It turned out that he, too, had a younger brother who loved to argue when they were kids, and they had played this same eerie game. Unable to get along with his brother, he wished for his brother to never speak again. As a result, he lost his gaming partner and could never finish the game, trapping him in it forever. Their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a loud crash. They rushed downstairs, only to find the living room in ruins. To make matters worse, the board happened to be in the part of the room where it disappeared. When Lisa had returned to normal, she had turned on the heater, and the intense heat source had drawn the alien spaceship back. taking out a corner of the house in the process. Without the board, they'll never escape this game for the rest of their lives. They had to find a way to retrieve the board. So, they started dismantling the furniture and throwing it into the fireplace, hoping to lure the spaceship back. However, Lisa, who had just finished her shower, was terrified when she saw this and immediately used a fire extinguisher to put out the flames. At that moment, the astronaut rushed over and dragged them to the living room. No one expected the spaceship to return yet again. This drove Lisa to the brink of madness. The next second, the spaceship's hatch opened, and a massive hook shot out. Terrified, Lisa bolted, but the astronaut grabbed her shoulder, urging her to stay by his side and not go anywhere. Looking into his sincere eyes, Lisa felt something she couldn't quite describe. At that moment, another alien spaceship arrived, which meant that if they wanted to survive, they would have to infiltrate the spaceship and retrieve the game board. But with aliens swarming outside, the small dumbwaiter in the house was the only way to sneak aboard the ship. This daunting task fell to Danny. Seeing Danny about to face danger alone, Walter finally put aside all his grievances and promised he would bring Danny back safely. As Danny descended, the gears of the dumbwaiter suddenly snapped, causing Danny to plummet at breakneck speed. Sensing the danger, the astronaut quickly grabbed the rope, preventing a disaster. Once the rope was securely fastened, a lizard-like alien found their location. At the same time, Danny, now inside the spaceship, spotted the exact location of the game board and immediately sneaked in. Just as he was about to grab the game board, he accidentally fell onto a burning conveyor belt, nearly getting caught by the lizard alien. However, Danny managed to retrieve the board from the conveyor belt's end, but unfortunately, the footprints he left behind were spotted by the alien, who then called for reinforcements to chase him down. At the last possible moment, Walter successfully pulled Danny out, but they were soon blocked by a group of lizard aliens. To their surprise, the robot they had encountered earlier had completed its self-repair and charged forward. The other guy treats Walter like an alien species and just chokes him. In the critical moment, Walter pulled out the reset card, and the robot miraculously changed, releasing its grip and charging toward the lizard aliens instead. What no one expected was that the lizard aliens were so terrified that they immediately fled in their spaceship, but it was already too late. Immediately after, the crowd began to continue the game. Just after Walter pressed the button, surprisingly, the golden wish card popped up again, and in the next second dazzling white light made the room as white as day. He looked behind him at the astronaut, and immediately made a wish that no one could have imagined. As the white light faded, a boy identical to Danny appeared before them, and at that moment, everyone realized that the astronaut was actually Walter, all grown up. With young Walter's help, older Walter finally came to terms with his past mistakes. Then, the two Dannys touched and merged into one. When older Walter touched young Walter, he instantly reverted to his childhood form and also merged with his younger self. The lizard aliens, unwilling to accept defeat, rallied a massive fleet of spaceships to exact their revenge. In the heat of the moment, Danny immediately pressed the button, only to see the red spaceship come straight to the end of the board and pop up a game over card. As the walls crumbled away, an enormous black hole appeared. Lisa, without hesitation, rushed to protect Danny, but instead, she was sucked into the black hole. The house began to disintegrate rapidly, and an exhausted Walter was ultimately pulled into the black hole as well. When Danny opened his eyes again, he found himself back at the start of the game, with everything around him restored to its original state. Just as he was about to restart the game,
Don't push that button.